The Maxwell Ranch sat alone against the Wyoming sky like a prayer waiting to be answered. Rebecca Hartwell stepped down from the hired wagon, her specimen cases heavy in her hands, and studied the weathered house with a geologist's eye for detail. Strong bones, she thought. Built to last. Miss Hartwell. The rancher who met her was tall, sun-worn, somewhere past 40. His handshake was firm but brief, as if he wasn't accustomed to touching strangers. Maxwell. These are my boys. 3 faces peered from behind their father's legs. The oldest, maybe 10, stood straighter than the others. The middle child watched her with careful eyes. The youngest thumb rested near his mouth before the boy remembered himself and dropped his hand. I appreciate you letting me study the formations on your northern pasture, Rebecca said. I'll be out of your way in a few days. Storm's coming. Maxwell glanced at the sky. Western weather don't wait on schedules. Rebecca followed his gaze to clouds that looked ordinary to her eastern eyes. I've camped through worse. Mr. Maxwell. He didn't argue, just nodded once. The boys showed her inside where she might wait out the afternoon. The house was clean, but joyless. Mended shirts hung on pegs, mended clumsily with masculine hands. Dinner smelled plain but adequate. A rocking chair sat by the fireplace, beautifully carved but dust-covered, positioned as if waiting for someone who would never return. The oldest boy, Benjamin, carried her bags to the spare room. You're a scientist. His voice held wonder and doubt in equal measure. A geologist? I study rocks. Just rocks. Rocks tell stories. Rebecca said, If you know how to listen. The boy's eyes lit briefly before his father called him to chores. Rebecca unpacked her equipment on Maxwell's porch, setting up her field table and organizing specimen jars. The air felt different than it had an hour before. Heavier. The horizon had dimmed without her noticing. She looked up. The sky had turned white. Snow began falling. Light at first. Then faster. Within minutes, the ranch house was disappearing behind a curtain of white. Rebecca's hand stilled on her compass. She'd seen storms before, but never one that arrived like ambush. Miss Hartwell. Maxwell stood in the doorway, his coat already on. You'll need to come inside. Now. Pride made her hesitate. Training made her argue. My equipment? Leave it. Storm like this. You won't find the house again. The wind hit then. Sudden and vicious. Snow swirled so thick she couldn't see the barn 20 yards away. Maxwell's hand closed on her arm, steadying her as they pushed toward the house. The distance felt impossible. Her face went numb. Her eyes burned. Inside. The door slammed shut behind them. The boys stared at her. At the snow already melting in her hair. Maxwell shook his head slightly. Whether at her stubbornness or the weather. She couldn't tell. Through the window. Her carefully arranged equipment vanished beneath white. The storm that had seemed like nothing now howled like something alive and hungry. Rebecca stood dripping on Maxwell's floor, her professional certainty buried as thoroughly as her instruments. She'd misjudged everything. By nightfall, the wind screamed loud enough to wake the dead. Rebecca tried to sleep on the settee near the fire, wrapped in blankets that smelled of wood smoke and soap. Through the walls, she heard the boys breathing. Maxwell's footsteps checking windows and doors. Dawn came gray and furious. Snow had drifted 6 feet against the barn. Maxwell fought his way out to tend livestock while Rebecca watched from the window, ashamed of her uselessness. When he returned, frost clung to his eyebrows and snow packed his boots. Telegraph's down, he said. Roads won't be clear for days, maybe weeks. The words hit harder than the cold. Rebecca's research timeline, her presentation in Boston, her carefully planned return, all of it dependent on weather that cared nothing for human schedules. She'd spent 10 years building her reputation as a serious scientist. One mispresentation could undo everything. I'm sorry for the trouble, she said. Ain't trouble. Just weather. Maxwell pulled off his gloves. You'll take Catherine's sewing room. Only private space we've got. Your wife? She's been gone 2 years. His voice was flat. Final. Room's just sitting there. The sewing room was small and tidy, with a narrow bed and a window facing east. A half-finished quilt lay folded in the corner. Rebecca touched it once, feeling like an intruder, then pulled her hand back. She spent the morning trying to be useful and mostly failing. She didn't know how to cook on a wood stove. She'd never mended anything but torn field notebooks. The boys watched her struggles with the careful politeness of children who'd learned too young not to expect much from the world. At noon, Benjamin appeared in her doorway with a tin cup. Steam rose from coffee so strong it could strip paint. Papa said you might want this. Thank you. She wrapped her hands around the warmth. That's very kind. The boy lingered, glancing toward her bags. What's in your cases? Miss, Rebecca studied his face, the hunger there, the loneliness. She'd seen that look in mirrors enough times to recognize it. Would you like to see? His nod was so eager it broke something in her chest. She opened the nearest case. Fossils lay cushioned in cotton, each labeled in her precise hand. Benjamin's eyes went wide. Is that real? 300 million years old? She lifted a trilobite, placed it in his small palm. Handle it carefully. He cradled it like something sacred. His brothers crowded close, all pretense of disinterest abandoned. Even the youngest, Samuel, stretched on tiptoes to see. How'd it get in a rock? Thomas asked. His voice was soft, rusty from disuse. Rebecca began to explain. The boys leaned closer. From the kitchen, Maxwell watched his sons' faces light with something he hadn't seen in 2 years. Wonder, joy, the pure pleasure of learning something new. Outside. The storm raged on. Inside, something else was beginning. Rebecca woke to silence. The storm had paused, though clouds still threatened more. She lay in Catherine Maxwell's bed, staring at Catherine Maxwell's ceiling, feeling the weight of a dead woman's space pressing down. She'd chosen geology because rocks didn't demand pieces of her soul. Her father, a professor, had wanted sons to carry his legacy. Instead, he got a daughter who memorized strata classifications and argued about mineral composition. Her mother had despaired of making her marriageable. The suitors who'd come had wanted her quieter, softer, less educated, less opinionated, less herself. She'd learned to need no one. It was easier than learning to become small, but lying here in this stranger's house, listening to children's voices drift through the walls, she wondered if easier was the same as better. She rose and dressed. The main room smelled of coffee and wood smoke. Maxwell stood at the stove, flipping flapjacks with the efficiency of long practice. The boys sat at the table, already eating. Morning, Miss Hartwell. Maxwell's voice was carefully neutral. Coffee's hot. She poured a cup and joined them. The boys ate like famine was expected, scraping plates clean. Maxwell watched them with an expression Rebecca recognized. Love mixed with helplessness. Devotion mixed with despair. Their mother died 2 years back, he said quietly, after the boys ran outside to check on the chickens. Childbirth. Baby too. Been just us since. I'm sorry. Hired a housekeeper once. Didn't last a month. He refilled his coffee. Too isolated, she said. Too lonely. Can't blame her. You manage well, Rebecca said. I keep them fed, keep them safe. He stared into his cup. But I can't give them what Catherine did. Can't make this house feel like home instead of just a place we survive. The rawness in his voice startled her. She'd expected frontier stoicism, not this quiet admission of failure. Before she could respond, the boys tumbled back inside, bringing cold air and excitement. Miss Rebecca. Benjamin had started calling her that without permission. Will you show us more fossils, please? She hesitated. These were research specimens, not teaching tools. But their faces held such desperate eagerness. When had anyone last wanted something from her that didn't require her to be less, "All right," she said. But carefully, she opened another case. The boys crowded close as she explained geological time, showed them how to identify different periods, taught them to sketch what they saw. They were ravenous for knowledge, absorbing everything she said. Thomas, the quiet one, touched a fossilized shell with careful fingers. If rocks can remember everything, do they get sad about what's gone? The question stopped her breath. She looked at this grieving child, at his brothers, at their father watching from across the room. Maxwell's expression held something she hadn't expected. Not resentment at her intrusion, not discomfort at her presence. Hope. She placed the ancient shell in Thomas's palm. "I think," she said slowly. "Rocks remember without judgment. They hold the past without pain. That's their gift to us." Thomas nodded. Satisfied, Samuel leaned against her shoulder, trusting as a puppy. Benjamin asked 17 more questions without pausing for breath. Maxwell caught her eye across the room. In that moment, they both knew. This storm had brought something more than danger. It had brought possibility neither of them had asked for, but both were beginning to need. The storm raged for 5 more days. On the 3rd morning, Rebecca stopped feeling like a visitor and started feeling like part of the house's rhythm. She still couldn't cook worth a damn, but she could teach. The main room became a classroom. She spread her specimens across the table, showed the boys how to catalog and sketch. Benjamin had a gift for observation, noting details she'd missed. Thomas asked questions that cut to the heart of things. Samuel's drawings were terrible but enthusiastic. Maxwell watched from the doorway while mending tack. She caught him smiling once when Benjamin correctly identified a Devonian period fossil. "You're a natural teacher," Maxwell said that evening, after the boys had fallen asleep. "They've learned more this week than all last year." "They're hungry for it," Rebecca said. "Not just knowledge, attention. Someone who sees them as more than mouths to feed. That while you became a scientist, someone saw you the opposite." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "No one saw me as I was, only as what I should become. Quieter. More domestic. Less curious. Less everything." Maxwell nodded slowly. "Folks tried that with me, too. Said I should sell the ranch after Catherine died. Move to town. Find easier work. As if losing her meant losing my right to this land. You didn't listen. Couldn't. This land's who I am." He met her eyes. "Reckon being a scientist is who you are." "I thought so." The admission surprised her. "Now I'm not certain. The boys transformed over those days." Thomas started speaking in full sentences, his voice growing stronger. Samuel laughed again, the sound bright as breaking ice. Benjamin's shoulders lost their rigid responsibility. He became a child again instead of a young man bearing weight too heavy. Rebecca discovered teaching them brought her more joy than any academic conference. When Benjamin grasped the concept of fossilization, when Thomas made connections between rock layers and time, when Samuel carefully labeled his first specimen, these moments mattered more than publication credits. Maxwell saw it too. She caught him watching her with something that made her breath catch. Not desire exactly. Recognition, as if he'd found something he'd stopped looking for. At dinner on the 5th night, she mentioned needing to return east by New Year. "I have a presentation scheduled. My research findings." The words fell into silence. Maxwell's face closed like a door slamming shut. The boys kept eating, but the warmth in the room flickered and dimmed. "Course," Maxwell said. "Your real life's waiting." She wanted to argue, but couldn't, because he was right. Wasn't he? Her life was in laboratories and universities? This was just an interruption. A pleasant one, but temporary. So why did the thought of leaving feel like abandoning something vital? The boys finally slept. Rebecca sat by the fire. unable to rest. The house creaked around her, settling into night. She didn't hear Maxwell approach until he spoke. "Can't sleep either." She shook her head. He poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one, settled into the chair across from her. For a while they sat in comfortable silence. The fire popped. Wind rattled the windows. "Tell me about Catherine," Rebecca said. Most men would deflect. Maxwell considered, then spoke. "Known her since we were kids. She was the prettiest girl in 3 counties, and somehow she chose me. 20 years we had—" His voice roughened. "Lost her trying to give me another son. Lost them both. I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "Feels like failure," he said quietly. "Can't teach them what their mother knew. Can't make this house warm the way she did. Just keep them fed, keep them safe, and hope it's enough." Rebecca leaned forward. "You're doing more than that. You're showing them strength, perseverance, how to keep living when living hurts. That ain't much. It's everything." He looked at her then, really looked. "Why didn't you marry, Miss Rebecca, woman like you? Educated and kind, seems like you'd have had plenty of chances." "I did." She smiled without humor. "Everyone wanted me smaller, quieter, less curious, less educated, less myself. I tried once to be what someone else needed, nearly lost who I was. His loss. I thought choosing solitude meant choosing strength." She stared into her cup. "Now I wonder if it just meant choosing fear." Maxwell was quiet a moment. Then, "Man who's threatened by a woman's mind is no man at all. That's their failure, not yours." The words struck something deep. She'd never heard a man say that. Never heard anyone validate what she'd always known but been told was wrong. "You think I'm educated," she said, "but I can't read weather, can't track animals, don't understand what land needs or how to read the seasons. Your knowledge is intelligence I never learned to value. Book learning's different than—" "No." She cut him off gently. "You're brilliant in ways books can't teach, ways that matter more out here. I name fossils. You keep things alive, which is more valuable." He smiled. Small but genuine. "Maybe both matter." "Maybe." She smiled back. They talked until the fire burned low. About his dreams for the ranch, her discoveries in the field, about loneliness and loss, and the small daily courage it took to keep moving forward. Maxwell added wood without breaking rhythm, as comfortable in her presence as breathing. Rebecca realized she hadn't thought about her research in 3 days. The realization didn't frighten her. It should have. That was the frightening part. The storm broke on the 6th day. Rebecca woke to brilliant sunshine on snow so white it hurt to look at. The world outside had been scrubbed clean. Beautiful. Terrible. "Roads will be clear in 2 days," Maxwell said at breakfast. His voice was carefully neutral. "I'll ride to town, check the telegraph." He left after chores. The boys sensed something wrong but didn't understand what. Rebecca tried to focus on organizing her specimens, preparing for departure. Her hands shook slightly as she closed cases. She wrote letters to colleagues explaining her delay, discussing her findings. Professional words and professional language. This time on the Maxwell Ranch was an interruption of her work. Inconvenient but manageable. She'd resume her research schedule upon return. The words looked right on paper. They felt like lies. Benjamin found the letters while trying to help. He brought them to his father when Maxwell returned from town, proud of being useful. Maxwell read them standing in the barn aisle, snow melting off his shoulders. Rebecca had called this time an interruption. Her work was what mattered. The ranch, the boys, him just obstacles delaying her real life. He'd been a fool to hope for anything else. When he came inside, everything had changed. He called her Miss Hartwell again instead of Rebecca, spoke politely but distantly, asked if she needed anything in town before she left. All kindness but no warmth. Rebecca felt the withdrawal like physical cold. She tried to bridge the gap but didn't understand what caused it. Had she done something wrong? said something offensive. She replayed their conversation from the night before, finding nothing. By evening, the house felt like it had that first day. Clean but joyless, surviving but not living. The boys retreated into quiet watchfulness. Thomas stopped asking questions. Samuel's laughter disappeared. Rebecca sat in Catherine's sewing room and tried not to cry. She'd finally found something that felt like belonging, and somehow she'd destroyed it without knowing how. The empty rocking chair in the main room seemed to mock them all. Another woman who'd left. Another absence that couldn't be filled. Maxwell stood in the barn long after chores finished, running his hands over tools that didn't need fixing. He'd let himself hope. That was his mistake. She had an important life waiting. Laboratories and universities and respect he couldn't begin to offer. She'd shown kindness during an inconvenience. Nothing more. He was just a rancher with 3 needy sons. What could he possibly give her that would be enough? The roads cleared faster than expected. 2 more days. The neighbor said, maybe 3. Then travel would be safe again. The household became funereal despite the good news. The boys moved through chores with mechanical efficiency. Meals passed in silence. Even Samuel's usual chatter died. The second evening, Benjamin found his father in the barn. "Papa, can we ask Miss Rebecca to stay?" Maxwell's hands stilled on the harness he was mending. "She has her own life. Son. Important work. We can't ask her to give that up. But she's sad here." Benjamin's voice cracked. "She wasn't sad before. What did we do wrong?" The question broke something in Maxwell's chest. "You didn't do nothing wrong. Sometimes people just can't stay, no matter how much we want them to. Like Mama." The boy's eyes filled. Maxwell pulled his son close. No words could fix this. No explanations could make it hurt less. He'd lost Catherine to death. Now he'd lose Rebecca to life. Both losses felt equally impossible. In the house, Rebecca packed her specimens with hands that wouldn't steady. The fossils looked like rocks again, just rocks. Not wonders, not stories. Teaching the boys had reminded her why she'd loved geology in the first place, not classification, but connection. Not hoarding knowledge, but sharing it. Her colleagues would say she was being foolish, sentimental, throwing away a career for what a rancher and 3 children she'd known less than 2 weeks. But when had she last felt this alive, this necessary, this scene? Samuel appeared in her doorway. He held a piece of paper, carefully folded. "I drew you something." She opened it. 4 figures stood outside a house, Maxwell and his 3 sons. Beside Maxwell was an empty space outlined in careful pencil. "This is where you go," Samuel said. His 6-year-old face held no guile, no manipulation, just honest confusion. "Why can't you stay forever?" Rebecca's throat closed. She knelt to his level, unable to speak. "Don't you like us?" Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas says you probably got better things to do than stay with us. But I thought maybe you liked teaching us. I thought maybe you were happy." "I am happy," she whispered. "So happy." "Then why are you leaving?" She had no answer, none that made sense even to herself. In the barn, Maxwell leaned against a stall, shoulders shaking. He'd survived Catherine's death. He'd survived 2 years of loneliness and fear and inadequacy. But watching his sons' hearts break again felt impossible to bear. Was pride worth losing love twice night fell? Christmas Eve had arrived without anyone noticing. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow Rebecca would leave. Tomorrow they'd all go back to surviving instead of living. The moon rose over snow that sparkled like broken glass. Christmas morning came soft and gray. The boys woke early but quietly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace. They'd made Rebecca gifts in secret drawings, mostly, and a rock Benjamin had found that might be a fossil. Thomas brought her coffee, the cup shaking in his hands. Please stay, he whispered. 2 words he hadn't spoken in weeks. 2 words that cost him everything. Rebecca couldn't answer. Her throat had closed completely. The boys gave her their gifts with ceremony. Benjamin's drawing showed her teaching them, all 4 faces smiling. Thomas had written her name in careful letters. Practicing for days. Samuel's picture was pure chaos, but earnest love. Thank you. She managed. These are beautiful. They didn't smile. They knew what came next. Rebecca finished packing because she didn't know what else to do. Maxwell brought the wagon around, checking harness with unnecessary thoroughness. Neither spoke. The distance between them felt wider than the horizon. She carried her cases to the porch. The boys followed like mourners at a funeral. When she reached for the first case, something broke. Samuel hit her legs, wrapping around them like he could hold her there through force of will. His sobs were desperate, animal. Don't go. Benjamin tried to be strong, tried to be the man of the house. But tears streamed down his face as he begged, Miss Rebecca, please, we need you. Please don't leave us. Thomas, who'd just learned to speak again, found words that destroyed her. Mama left. You can't leave too. Please, please. 3 boys sobbing so hard they could barely breathe. 3 souls shattering in front of her. Rebecca stood frozen, cases in her hands, her own tears falling. Maxwell stepped forward. She expected him to pull the boys away, to apologize for their display, to restore order. Instead, he just looked at her. His eyes held everything he hadn't said. Vulnerability. Hope. Fear. Love that had grown without permission but was real as the ground beneath them. Please, he said quietly. Just that don't. 2 words. Everything in them. Rebecca looked at this man who valued her mind, who saw her completely and wanted her anyway. At 3 boys who needed her not for what she could be but for who she already was. At specimen cases that suddenly felt light as air. Her research could wait. Papers could be written from anywhere. But these hearts, these people, this family that somehow became hers, they couldn't wait. Love couldn't wait. She set down the cases. My research can wait, she said, voice steady despite tears. Love can't. The boys' sobs transformed to hope so fast it was almost funny. Samuel still clung to her legs. Benjamin stared like she might disappear if he blinked. Thomas repeated, You're staying there over and over, needing confirmation. I'm staying. Rebecca said. Maxwell closed the distance between them. Didn't touch her yet, but present in a way he hadn't been for days. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Your career will adapt? She smiled through tears. Turns out the West has plenty of geological formations to study. And I found something here more important than any research. What's that? Home. The word hung between them. Simple, true, absolute. Samuel finally let go of her legs. Benjamin wiped his eyes. Thomas smiled for the first time in days. Maxwell's hand found hers, careful and warm. The sun broke through clouds, turning snow to diamonds. The empty cases sat forgotten on the porch. Inside, the rocking chair waited. But this time, someone would fill it. This time, love had chosen to stay. Spring came late to Wyoming that year. Rebecca stood on the Maxwell porch, her porch now watching ice break on the creek. 3 months since Christmas. 3 months since she'd chosen love over leaving. She'd written her university contacts explaining the change. Some were disappointed. Most were skeptical. A few understood that scientific discovery didn't require universities. The West had formations Eastern geologists had barely documented. Her research would continue, just from a different location. Her papers, when published, would note Maxwell's observations about erosion patterns and land formation. Practical wisdom paired with scientific analysis, both valuable, both necessary. The house had transformed. Not replacing Catherine, her memory lived in the boys' stories. The quilt Rebecca finally finished. The rocking chair that now held life instead of loss. But new warmth had grown alongside old grief. Room enough for both. She and Maxwell had married quietly in March. The boys insisted on being part of the ceremony. They called her Miss Rebecca, never Mama. The distinction honored Catherine's place while welcoming Rebecca's own, not replacement, evolution. Miss Rebecca. Samuel appeared at her elbow, as he did approximately every 10 minutes. He held a rock carefully. Is this one old? She examined it with full attention. Very old. Cretaceous period. See these patterns? He nodded seriously, absorbing every word. Maxwell worked in the north pasture with Benjamin, teaching him to read fence lines and understand drainage. Patient instruction passing wisdom forward. Rebecca watched them, warmed by the sight. Thomas sat beside her on the porch steps, sketching the creek. He'd developed real talent, capturing detail she sometimes missed. Miss Rebecca, can we catalog specimens this afternoon? After your father finishes teaching Benjamin. She smiled. Your father can tell you what each rock layer means for planting. Science tells you what. Experience tells you why. You need both. Like you and Papa, Thomas said. Both smart, just different. Exactly like that. Maxwell caught her watching, even across the distance. She felt his warmth. He said something to Benjamin, then headed toward the house. His walk held easy confidence now. The haunted look had faded from his eyes. Thought you might want coffee, he said, climbing the porch steps. Always. She took the cup, their fingers brushing. 3 months married, and the touch still sent warmth through her. He settled into the rocker, his chair, though he let her use it too. Got a letter from your colleague in Boston. Wants to know when you're presenting findings. I wrote back. Said my findings are ongoing. Western formations require long-term study. She smiled. Might take decades. That's so, at least. She met his eyes. Maybe longer. Samuel brought her 3 more rocks before dinner. Benjamin returned from the pasture muddy but happy. Thomas showed her his sketches. Maxwell made stew that had improved considerably since Rebecca had started teaching him her mother's recipes. After dinner, the boys played checkers while Maxwell and Rebecca sat on the porch watching sunset paint the sky. Her specimen cases sat open in the corner, accessible to anyone curious. What had been locked in private was now shared and living. Ever regret it? Maxwell asked quietly. Staying, never. She meant it absolutely. Do you regret asking, never? His hand found hers. Just sometimes can't believe you chose this. Chose us. I chose truth, Rebecca said. For years I thought I had to pick between my mind and my heart. Turns out I can have both. Just needed someone who saw that. You taught me something too, Maxwell said. That different kinds of smart can fit together. That loss don't mean you stop living. That love can come twice if you're brave enough. Inside. Samuel whooped as he won at checkers. Benjamin accused him of cheating. Thomas mediated with unexpected wisdom. The sounds of family, imperfect and whole. Rebecca leaned against Maxwell's shoulder. The last light turned clouds gold and rose. Somewhere in the east, her former colleagues were presenting papers to rooms of academics. Important work. Valuable work. But she was here, teaching boys who'd been starving for knowledge. Loving a man who'd been starving for partnership. Building a life that felt more real than any laboratory ever had. The storm that had stranded her had cleared long ago. She'd stopped counting days until departure sometime around New Year. Science had always been her destination. Love turned out to be the place she'd arrived. Both could be true. Both could be hers. The rocks would wait. They were patient by nature. But family. This makeshift, unexpected, wholly genuine family had asked only that she stay. So she did. Some research finds you. Some love finds you first. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you don't have to choose. Sometimes you get both. And the combination makes something neither could be alone. Complete, whole, home. The sun set over Wyoming territory, painting the Maxwell Ranch in shades of gold and promise. Inside, lamps glowed warm against gathering dusk. Outside, stars emerged one by one. And on the porch, a woman who'd traveled west to study rocks sat beside the man who'd taught her that some discoveries can't be found in specimens. Only in hearts brave enough to stay when leaving would be easier. Only in love that arrives unexpected as a Christmas storm and changes everything it touches into something better than before.